You know what's worse than having a bad year in politics? Having everyone predict your bad year before it's even properly started. And that's exactly what's happening to Keir Starmer right now. GB News literally stopped their programming to discuss how this year is going to be an absolute disaster for the Prime Minister. And honestly, when even breakfast television is roasting you before you've had your cornflakes, you know you're in trouble. Welcome back to UK Political Insight, where we serve up the political chaos piping hot. And today's serving is particularly spicy. Stephen Dixon called it extraordinary. Anna Mikhailova called it potentially disastrous. Social media called it a pickle, which is very British, but also painfully accurate. We're talking about a government that's barely 18 months into power and already facing predictions of electoral carnage, leadership questions, and the kind of public sentiment that makes you wonder if they've considered just packing it in and taking up gardening instead. So buckle up, because we're diving deep into why 2025 might be the year Keir Starmer wishes he'd stayed in bed. Let's start with the elephant in the studio, or should I say the breakfast show prediction that sparked all this. Stephen Dixon and Anne Diamond, hosting GB News on a Saturday morning, which is usually reserved for lighter fare and maybe some cooking segments, decided to go full political apocalypse mode. Dixon pointed out that Labour's had an extraordinary 18 months in power, and if you've been paying attention, extraordinary is doing some heavy lifting there. It's extraordinary in the same way a house fire is extraordinary. Technically accurate, but perhaps not in the way you'd want. Then he dropped the real bombshell. Local elections are coming up in May, and Nigel Farage, the man who treats politics like it's a particularly aggressive game of Monopoly, has announced he's throwing the piggy bank at it. Now, when Farage starts spending money on local elections, you know he smells blood in the water. And according to Dixon, it's looking like it could be a disaster for everybody else. Not just bad, not just challenging, a disaster. That's the kind of language you usually reserve for natural catastrophes and England's performance at major football tournaments. Anna Mikhailova, the show's guest and someone who clearly doesn't sugarcoat political analysis, agreed wholeheartedly. She pointed to May as being a crucial point, which is political speak for this is where everything could go spectacularly wrong. But here's where it gets really interesting. She didn't just say Labour might do badly. She said if Labour loses Wales, if they tank in Scotland, we could be looking at a very painful night for the Prime Minister. Loses Wales. Let that sink in for a moment. Wales, which has been Labour-led for longer than most of us have been alive. Wales, where Labour is practically an institution. The suggestion that they could lose it isn't just concerning, it's apocalyptic. And Scotland? Well, Scotland's already complicated with the SNP and the whole independence question. But if Labour does badly there too, that's not just an English problem. That's a United Kingdom problem, or should I say a potentially less United Kingdom problem. When you're facing potential wipeouts in 2 of the 4 nations that make up your country, you're not having a bad night. You're having an existential crisis. But Mikhailova wasn't done twisting the knife. She went on to say that it looks set to be an extraordinary year in politics, and that the fortunes of both leaders of the 2 traditionally main political parties are in doubt. Then she dropped this absolute grenade. We don't know if Keir Starmer is going to be leading the Labour Party by the end of the year, just casually suggesting that the Prime Minister might not make it through the year as leader on breakfast television, while people are having their toast. Absolutely brutal. Now, before we go any further, let's talk about what this actually means. Leadership speculation isn't new in British politics. It's practically our national sport after complaining about the weather and queuing. But when you're less than 2 years into government and people are already openly questioning whether you'll still be leader by Christmas, that's not normal political chatter. That's a sign that things have gone seriously wrong. Prime ministers are supposed to have a honeymoon period, that time when everyone gives them the benefit of the doubt and lets them settle in. Starmer's honeymoon was shorter than a Love Island relationship, and about as successful. The local elections in May are genuinely crucial, and here's why. They're not just about councils and bin collection schedules and local planning disputes. They're a referendum on the government's performance so far. They're the first major test of public opinion since the general election, and they tell you whether people are happy with what they're getting. And right now, all the signs point to people being very, very unhappy. When Nigel Farage is excited about local elections, that should set off alarm bells in Downing Street loud enough to wake up the entire street. Reform UK, Farage's party, has been steadily building momentum. They're positioning themselves as the alternative for people who feel betrayed by the Conservatives and let down by Labour. They're hoovering up disaffected voters like a Dyson on steroids. And Farage saying he's throwing the piggy bank at these elections means he thinks this is his moment. He's not known for wasting money on lost causes. If he's investing heavily, it's because he thinks there are seats to be won and the message that will resonate. And that message is essentially that both main parties have failed, and it's time for something different. Which brings us to the social media reaction, because nothing says you've lost the public quite like getting roasted on Twitter. One viewer called it a right pickle, which is such a wonderfully understated British way of saying absolutely catastrophic mess. They pointed out that people want someone to sort the mess out. And here's the thing, that was supposed to be Labour's entire pitch. They were the ones coming in to clean up after 14 years of conservative chaos. They were going to fix everything. Turns out, fixing everything is harder than it looks, and so far the fixes aren't very visible while the problems are very, very obvious. Another commenter got more specific, saying that Kemi is going in the right direction while Starmer is going backwards. Now, whether you agree with that assessment or not, the fact that people are making that comparison is damaging. Badenoch is the leader of the opposition. She's supposed to be rebuilding from a devastating election loss. The fact that anyone thinks she's got more momentum than the actual prime minister is a problem. They went on to slag off Starmer's New Year's address as wooden, insipid, and the Weasley word salad. Wooden and insipid I'll give them, but Weasley word salad is poetry. That's the kind of description that sticks. But perhaps the most damning comment was from someone who said people have had enough of both parties, that they've wrecked the UK between them and don't deserve to exist. That's not just criticism of Labour or the Conservatives individually, that's a rejection of the entire two-party system that's dominated British politics for a century. When voters start saying both main parties are useless, that creates space for alternatives, and right now, those alternatives are circling like sharks. Let's talk about what's actually gone wrong for Starmer, because it's not like he woke up one day and found himself in this mess by accident. Well, actually, maybe that's exactly what happened. The problem is that Labour came into power with massive expectations after 14 years of opposition. People voted them in hoping for change, for improvement, for something different. And what have they gotten? More of the same with slightly different accents delivering the bad news. The economy is still struggling. The NHS is still in crisis. Immigration is still a massive political football. Public services are still stretched beyond breaking point. And while you can absolutely argue that these are inherited problems and that fixing them takes time, voters don't care about excuses. They care about results. And when you spent years in opposition promising you had the answers, you don't get much sympathy when those answers turn out to be, well, actually, it's quite complicated. Then there's the messaging problem. Starmer's communication strategy seems to involve saying very little of substance while using many words to say it, which, as we saw with that Venezuela interview, doesn't exactly inspire confidence. His New Year's address was meant to be a rallying cry, a vision for the year ahead, a reason to believe things would get better. Instead, it was the political equivalent of elevator music, pleasant background noise that you forget the moment it stops playing. And the broken promises issue is huge. Politicians break promises all the time. We're almost numb to it. But Labour specifically ran on being different. They ran on integrity and honesty and changing the way politics works. So when they break promises or U-turn on policies or fail to deliver what they said they would, it hits harder. It's not just political disappointment. It's betrayal of the brand. They sold themselves as the trustworthy alternative. And trust, once lost, is incredibly hard to rebuild. Now, let's zoom out a bit, because this isn't just about Starmer, or even just about Labour. This is about a fundamental shift in British politics. The two-party system that's dominated for decades is creaking under pressure. People don't automatically vote Labour or Conservative anymore based on family tradition or class identity. They're shopping around. They're voting for whoever they think will actually deliver for them. And right now, neither main party is making a compelling case. The Conservatives are in disarray after their historic defeat. They're trying to rebuild under Kemi Badenoch, but they're fighting internal battles about what the party should even stand for. Reform UK is breathing down their neck on the right, taking voters who feel the Tories went soft or betrayed Brexit or didn't cut immigration enough. The Liberal Democrats are picking up seats in traditional Tory heartlands among voters who want something more centrist and competent. The Conservatives are being squeezed from multiple directions, and it's not clear they have a path back to power anytime soon.
Labor, meanwhile, is discovering that being in government is much harder than being in opposition. In opposition, you can criticize everything and promise the moon. In government, you actually have to deliver, and you have limited resources and competing priorities, and a hostile media and an impatient public. Starmer's cautious managerial style might have worked to get elected, but it's not working to govern effectively. People want vision and leadership and passion, and what they're getting is careful, non-committal statements and endless caveats. And the broken promises issue is huge. Politicians break promises all the time. We're almost numb to it. But Labor specifically ran on being different. They ran on integrity and honesty and changing the way politics works. So when they break promises or U-turn on policies or fail to deliver what they said they would, it hits harder. It's not just political disappointment. It's betrayal of the brand. They sold themselves as the trustworthy alternative, and trust once lost is incredibly hard to rebuild. Now, let's zoom out a bit, because this isn't just about Starmer, or even just about Labour. This is about a fundamental shift in British politics. The two-party system that's dominated for decades is creaking under pressure. People don't automatically vote Labour or Conservative anymore based on family tradition or class identity. They're shopping around. They're voting for whoever they think will actually deliver for them. And right now, neither main party is making a compelling